Hi there, my name's Steve, and welcome back to the Go Football podcast. So, this is the podcast where I talk all about grassroots football. Parents, players, referees, you're all welcome at the Go Football podcast. Sit tight, you're in the right place. However, this week on the lineup, I will be talking about why do players drop out? Because every coach has seen it before. Players that have loved football when they were 8, they were always at training, all smiles, and then all of a sudden they stop coming, and often the players don't come back. So, let's cue the whistle, let's get into it. So big welcome back to episode 52. So yeah, today, look, we're going to be looking at players and why they also drop out. Like I just said there, we get 8 years old, love come in, always at training, always smiles, then all of a sudden, bam, stop at a certain age as well. So we're going to look at a couple of things really. One, the ages that players are most likely to drop out and why they might do that as well. Some of the real reasons behind it too. How football maybe compares with other sports and other activities, and what can we actually do to keep players in the game for a little bit longer. We'll go a bit longer, shall we, as well? You can tell I don't edit this too much, can't you? But yeah, let's look at some of the key dropout ages then, really, because if we look at some of the stats, and I mentioned some of the stats last week as well, around 70% of children drop out when they get to the age of 13. So the biggest age group that we've got in organised sports is between about 6 and 12 years, somewhere around there, but 13 onwards. A lot of teams, a lot of coaches will notice this, that a lot of players are dropping out. And it is a steep decline from there. You probably notice on, I don't know, maybe your local Facebook groups and the spotted sites and all those kind of things. You probably notice all of those recruiting players, now recruiting for next season, and you seem to see that more. I would say you always do see it from those under 13, under 14, under 15 age groups, way more than what you would see for the younger age groups. Now, obviously, there's a couple of other reasons in there. The format's smaller, so we're looking for either 5 or 7 players at a time, maybe 9 on some of the, as we start moving through the stages. But when it's at 11 aside, how many do you need in your squad? To have a successful squad, I always think that sort of like 15 to 16 maybe players is probably good to have for one of those. But it does sort of tell us that the biggest risk for players to drop out of grassroots football and other sports is anywhere from about 12 to 15. And that's not just in football as well. Across multiple sports, there's been loads of studies that do show that people are more involved in activities during the primary school ages. So between the 6 and right the way up to sort of like around the sort of like 11 mark, really. But I think that the first year of school, year 7s, maybe year 8s, there's a lot of involvement there too. But yeah, when you get to secondary school, yeah, massive drop off. Now, are we competing with just other football teams? I wouldn't say so. I would say that it's not just we're competing against other football teams, football players. We're competing against absolutely everything. And, if you're looking at the dropouts, and it's the same all the way through different sports, basketball, rugby, those kind of sports, it's probably more of a youth sport problem rather than maybe a football problem as well. So why do players start dropping out? I think there's a lot of reasons. Like I said, it's probably not just against football versus football teams or anything like that. When they start secondary school, they start things like their exams. They start studying more. They start thinking about, what do I want to be when I grow up? They start thinking of those things. And I just had a player recently who has been coming to me for over a year for one-to-ones, and now just decided that they're going to do something very academic at school. They want a job that's very academic, and they are going to absolutely bookworm their way through a couple of years. And you know what, that's fine. But they're also dropping everything to do with sports for it too. So there's a couple of reasons really why. But I do think there's a mix of factors. If you think about it for like an adult's point of view, like why do we stop playing sports as adults? Well, it's not just that it's not just other sports that we're competing against. It's family life, it's work. It's sometimes I used to work in the leisure industry. We used to always say with gym memberships, we're always competing with the likes of Coronation Street, Emmerdale, and EastEnders. We're competing for time, and it's time that we're competing for too. So we have to make sure we do a lot of different things. And like I say, there's probably a lot of other factors that also go in there. So, I mean, some of the factors could be that it stops being fun for them. If you look at the age groups that we see the biggest drop off of, yeah, that's when everything becomes a little bit more serious. That's when it becomes a little bit more focused on results. Maybe there's too much pressure for some children in those environments, and maybe we're not giving them a positive enough environment for them to be able to play in. And sometimes players, they just lose the enjoyment. If they're feeling like it's too much pressure and there's too much going on there, then it can definitely affect how they perceive the game and what they want to do. And I think that, like when anyone loses enjoyment for anything, whether that's gym or whether that is something else, when the enjoyment goes, so do the numbers, and so does people wanting to take part in those kind of activities. But I do think that the increased pressure, moving to 11v11, probably, raising those expectations as well, increasing the competition, especially when people aren't expected to have equal game time, and each to their own with their own teams of how they want to manage that. But if you're starting to do that and have the increased competition for places and things like that, and selection being more important, maybe some players are going to start feeling judged. Maybe they're not going to want to keep going back. So that's why it's important to have that positive, reinforced environment for them to be in, where they want to turn up, they want to go, they want to be part of that experience of being part of that football team. But you also get probably a couple of other development differences too, between the ages of 12 to 15. Some players grow early, some players late develop. We've talked about that recently in quite a few of them. What you often notice is like early developers, they often do dominate as well, and late developers can also struggle a little bit. That can affect some of their things like their confidence, their playing time, their enjoyment. So, if you look at a lot of teams and they're all bigger players, it's probably because the younger ones that were, well, not younger, but less developed players at that age group probably thought, yeah, I'm never going to get in the team. Someone's bigger, someone's stronger, someone's this. Maybe as coaches, we just need to be a little bit more aware of that, and maybe we can help them as they go through that development as well, and as they start catching up, we can keep them involved all the way through there. But I think that reduced playing time is a key one here for a lot of players as to why they drop out of teams, because squads, they'll get bigger, substitutions probably increase a little bit more, stronger players play more, which sometimes there's a really good argument to say that stronger players should be playing a little bit more to make it a more equal game maybe sometimes. But also, I think for some players that's going to seem a little bit disingenuous for them as well. And sometimes with teenagers, look, they're going to get loads and loads of other interests. This is the time when they can start saying, I want to go here, I want to go there. And under 7 and under 8, they go where their parents tell them to. But does a 14-year-old? Potentially not. I memean, look, I've got a 14-year-old, thinks that they're 21, thinks that they can do absolutely everything. Yeah, they want more social lives. PS5s and Xboxes definitely come into that. Even sometimes things like part-time jobs and maybe other sports and other, other pastimes that they're thinking of also have to compete for the same amount of time, which we kind of mentioned earlier. Football has to compete with that, and if it's not enjoyable, guess what's going to lose? Probably the most less enjoyable thing that they can do. And if that's football, because they're sat around half the time, don't enjoy the training sessions, always pick last for something, yeah, they're going to enjoy that a lot less. And sometimes I've seen some really, really good players that have come to me for one-to-one sessions, and yeah, they're starting to lose a love for the game through their team for no other reason than they just don't feel like they're being treated equally to everyone else. So that is one of the main reasons that I would think. But if we compare things like football and other activities, it's not just happening in football, it's happening across lots of other sports. The dropouts, if you look at the research, it's pretty much the same for all activities. So you will be looking at football, rugby, basketball. However, interestingly, when I was checking the stats out, individual activities like gym, fitness often increase through teenagers' years. So as they get a little bit older, they start doing those. Probably a little bit of pressure from things online sometimes. Maybe someone that they keep seeing loads of gym stuff that comes up on their feeds. But what do those kind of solo activities give them of going to the gym? Gives them probably a little bit more freedom. There's probably less pressure. There's probably less control. And in contrast, to that, an organised team sport, and some people do like it, can sometimes maybe have felt too rigid, maybe too demanding, maybe time consuming for them too. Maybe they want to be able to do things when they want to be able to do them, or when it fits in with the other activities that they've got. So, if grassroots becomes too structured, then maybe that's a bit of a problem for some players, and that's maybe part of the reason why there's such a big dropout through a lot of players through the age groups, really. And sometimes it's so easy to just go and do those. If you've got to, let's just say that we've got, like, I don't know, a 14, 15, 16-year-old doing GCSEs, getting towards those kind of ages, and they've got to do really well because they've decided they're going to be a doctor. There's nothing wrong with that. We need more doctors. They're going to work extra hard, and maybe they don't, maybe for their coursework and things that are coming in like that, maybe they're going to think, I need to do it all. I'd rather just go gym first thing in the morning rather than wait till 2 o'clock for a kickoff where I'm not back until 5 o'clock. I can spend all day. I can go to the gym, get it out of my head, and then I can go and do it. Or I can do my work, and when my work is done, then I can go and do my activity that I want to go to, like whether it's the gym or go for a run or whatever it is. Maybe they're taking some activities in that kind of way instead. I think maybe another part as to why people also drop out and why some of these young players are dropping out is maybe confidence, really. I think confidence is probably a major factor in why people drop out of any activity, maybe any sport, maybe anything. I think that if they feel like they're more competent, maybe they feel a bit more valued in the group, maybe if they feel like part of the group. Listen, some coaches do some amazing things. They take them laser quest and they take them bowling and they've got dinners out and they've got all the rest of those things, and that's great because that's more fun, and that'll probably reduce some of the dropouts that they get, being a bit more confident in the groups that they're in. But if you've got players that are, sitting on the bench and just being bench warmers, and they're getting criticised with every single pass that they do, and maybe they feel like they're behind all the other players, development wise, then are they more likely to quit? There's I think that's definitely going to be a factor into it. And when are they going to start feeling more conscious about themselves and more self-aware about it? It's probably going to be between that 13 to 15 mark, isn't it? Or maybe the 12 to 15, especially when they go up to their secondary schools. So yeah, confidence and enjoyment, they're very closely linked, I think. If you're enjoying something, it's generally because you're confident with it. There's loads of times where I've been to a karaoke and I've not known the words and I'm just not very confident at singing it. So it probably comes across like I'm trying to read off things. Or alternatively, if I know the words to it, which is basically there's only 2 songs that I've got. And I will be judged for them as well. But one of them is a Venga Boys song that I know, and the other one's a Spice Girls song, which I shouldn't really admit into the open. But yeah, 2 songs that I know all the words for, they're the ones that I've got. But I feel really, really confident with those 2 songs. But another song, I'm not so confident with it. And that makes it probably more enjoyable for me. And I'm sure that that's exactly the same for youth sports, for a lot of young players that want to be engaged and they want to be involved and they want to feel like football is the thing that they want to go and do. I think that keeping that enjoyment there is absolutely key, and we need to do that all the time. If we make sure that players feel involved and they feel supported and that they feel like they're improving, like they don't need to be improving, they just need to feel like they're improving and getting something from there as too. The social interactions that they get too. If they're getting really good social interactions within that training sessions and the games, again, really, really good for them to have. And like I just said, the link between confidence and also their enjoyment is going to make them want to keep on coming back. So as coaches, what can we maybe do? What can we do as coaches? What can we do to keep people coming back, keep people coming through, and also missing that little window that there seems to be of like the 12 to 15 where people generally are having their drop-offs. I think it's actually a bit older than that, although I did the research, it said 12 to 15. I actually think maybe 16 is probably the age as well, when especially the 16-year-olds that are in school full-time, where they're hitting those GCSEs and they've got loads of pressure. For anyone who's got a 16-year-old, they'll know how hard they're working. When my son was doing his GCSEs, he was locked in his room, absolute bookworming it all the way through. And because he needed his grades for him to go to college, and that was way more important than anything else that he was doing for him at that time. He sacrificed coming downstairs to sit with us, he sacrificed loads of other stuff, and I'm really proud of him for being able to do that. But that might be one of the reasons why people drop out of youth sports. So what can we do as coaches? What's that missing bit then? So I think, one, we need to be engaging as coaches and also as parents. For the more that we are engaging and not forceful with it is probably one of the best options that we've got. Involve everyone in all of them, so the social interactions are the same as well, and make it feel like it's football. Don't let them feel like they're turning up to like an army training camp, and when we say we're doing drills, they feel like they're doing drills. That rather more they should be doing practices than feeling like it. Because if we can engage with people more and better and make it more enjoyable, they'll stay longer. And I think really it's quite as simple as that. Really, I mean, if you look at some late developers, what can we do for coaches for some of those? Not every player is going to develop at the same time. I think sometimes we need to be patient with those. I mean, some of the best players at 16 might have been some of the worst players when they were 12. And if we can get them through that gap of their growth and development stage, that'll make it much better for you as a coach as well, and great. But also you'll have really helped out some of those players and keeping them in there. And what else in trader sessions and also games, especially for games, this one as well, is just reduce that fear of mistakes. Create an environment where mistakes are part of learning. And it's not really something to fear. The amount of times that you must hear other coaches, parents as well, sometimes shouting on because something's gone wrong. They're kids. They're supposed to do something wrong. Listen, none of them are going to go to school and get every single answer right in every single test that they ever do, ever. Then go to college and get everything right. Then go to uni and get everything right. They have to go through a learning phase. And if we think about education in that way, where we're allowing them to get things wrong there, why can't they get things wrong when they're playing football too? So, yeah, players will probably stay where they feel they belong. There's probably going to be loads of experiences and loads of people being able to make comments and have experiences of their child not being in a team that suited them, moving to another team, and then they were able to do things like build friendships. Like there was probably better culture there as well. The connections were probably better. Maybe the parents were better on the sideline. The coaches were better. The players were all right too. So there was probably a number of different reasons why. So I think all those things, coaches, that will really, really help. So I suppose, just as we come to the end of the podcast, and I know this one's a bit of a short one too about players dropping out, but it was one that I just definitely wanted to get in and not miss whilst I had time. Why are players dropping out then as well? So I don't think it's just one thing. If we just kind of summarize the last 15 minutes or so, yeah, pressure. Yeah, it's going to be pressure. It may be their confidence, maybe the enjoyment, maybe some of the opportunities that they're getting. Maybe they're not getting quite enough opportunities within the team that they thought that they were getting or were getting when they were a little bit younger. Maybe they developed really quick, everyone caught up with them, and then now that they're at the 14 stage where they were the biggest for 2 or 3 years, and now they're just bang average as well. And there's nothing wrong with being bang average. Maybe they're going to feel like less important in the team, and also the environment that they're in. The environment is so important for youth players because that is what's going to keep them either coming back, enjoying it, and not wanting to say those words which were don't want to go to football today as well. If it's enjoyable, everyone wins as well, and it's worth it. It's definitely worth keeping your sessions really enjoyable, and you can do that through a number of different ways. I always do it through small-sided games. Everything's a game, everything's a game, everything's a game all the time. And that way, one, it feels like football. Everyone's touching the ball loads. And, whether it's 1v1s, 2v2s, 2v3s, 3v4s, whatever you want to put in, but everyone loses if we just turn up and maybe just do the same thing over and over and over and keep it fairly boring and straightforward. So, look, I'd love to hear your thoughts on why you got players, or maybe if any of the sections that we kind of covered today as well, maybe moving your players from team to team, environment, culture, maybe you've had players that have dropped out and then gone back to football. What was the ignition to get them to go back as well? Look, I'd love to hear all of that. And you can obviously get hold of me. gofootballpod@gmail.com. Again, you can follow us on all the socials, and you can also do something very special for me if you could, and that is to forward this to the coaches that either, if your parents, forward it over to your coaches so they can maybe listen to this too. And if you're a coach, maybe send it and put it onto your WhatsApp group of, look, here's, we're heading towards this age group now. This is what we're going to try and do to keep everyone engaged more and more. Look, I would love to hear your feedback, whether that's on the socials. You can obviously get us on Spotify, get us Amazon Music, you can get us on YouTube, but all the other socials as well. So TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, all the normal ones that you got, and obviously YouTube too again. So look, this one has been about why players are dropping out of grassroots football and youth sports. So, look, I hope that you all have a nice weekend or a nice week, and I will speak to you all next week.